Morning, everyone, and welcome to our first EBnet in the Moment webinar for 2025. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this morning on the call today. We've got trustees, management committees, advisors, regulators, and other industry influencers. Thank you for taking the time this morning to attend this, what I believe to be a very important conversation around inclusive financial planning and how this impacts our future business models and our future world in terms of advice and the communication and education we provide to both fund members and our individual clients who we consult to. Just a little bit of housekeeping for today's session. The session will run for just over 60 minutes, and that's to make sure that we meet the requirements for CPD verification from our verification body, the FPI, who's on the call today. So we will run for about 65 minutes. I'll explain how we do the CPD verification process and how you can apply for your certificate at the end of the session. So please stick around for that if it does apply to you. During the session, we try and keep it interactive, right? So you'll see that there's a chat box on the right that you are welcome to ask any of your questions on. We also are going to have some polls during the session in case you're a little bit shy. We'll encourage some engagement with you and get your views on some what could be controversial issues. So we'll look for your participation and engagement there. And we'll also be handing out a couple of things during the session. So I can see some of you are practicing already and popping your thoughts and your good mornings in there. So thank you for that. And feel free to engage. I will control the kind of when the questions are asked and make sure that we try and hit as many of your very important questions and thoughts that we can. And if we can't, we'll follow that up with some communication through our normal channels, which I'll share with you later as well. So without further ado, I think what I'll do is I'll introduce the panelists for this morning. And I'll start with Nikki MacDonald. She is the HOD for Certification and Standards from the Financial Planning Institute. We've got Terence Tobin, who is a certified financial planner and the director of financial planning at Rich Ideas Group. Terence is one of the top 50 acknowledged IFAs or independent financial advisors in South Africa, and it's a privilege to have him here. We have Bertie, not that it's not a privilege to have everybody else here, but of course you all are welcome. Bertie Null, who's the head of legal advisors and product lead at Momentum Distribution Services. We've got Matt Latiti, who is the head of member engagement at Alexforbes. And then we've got finally Jacques Kutzer, who is the GM for strategy at Sanlam's retail distribution businesses. While the panelists are coming on stage, we're going to play a short video from our sponsor of today's event, which is Glacier by Sanlam.
Solid partnerships form the foundation of prosperous families, communities, and nations. For more than 26 years, Glacier has built long-standing partnerships with our investors, some of the industry's best financial intermediaries, and investment professionals. Our collective expertise and collaborative spirit have ensured that we are leaders in the industry. We are a gateway to a world of limitless possibilities for investing, with access to the best of local and global funds from different fund managers in one place. Over more than 2 decades, our steady growth has been the result of our dedicated team of professionals, our world-class approach in everything we do, and our unwavering support of financial intermediaries. Our partnerships with other world-class brands have ensured that we are the leading investment platform in the industry, with hundreds of billions of assets under administration. Our solutions encompass local investments, including fixed-term investments and investments with guarantees, international investments, retirement savings solutions, and retirement income solutions. Each solution has its own distinct purpose, and they share the superior quality and commitment that have come to distinguish Glacier. As the portal to an ocean of investment opportunities, we recognize your need for a partner that understands your world implicitly. You need more than world-class solutions, more than committed service and cutting-edge technology, and tools that enable you to achieve and maintain a leading position in your industry. You need a partner to support and enable you through all eventualities. Glacier by Sanlam is the investment partner of choice.
Right, morning everyone.
Good morning.
Right.
Good
Excellent.
morning.
I can see all our panelists have made it on screen and didn't take the easy route out overnight. So welcome everybody to this morning's very important conversation. And I'm going to set the scene by really looking and unpacking some of the stats that we started the session with in the EBnet video. And it's well known that South Africa has a very well-developed financial system and a retirement and investment industry that is highly regulated. In fact, it's one of the best on the continent. But our savings culture and our savings outcomes are dire. And you know, research that's just come out now after the latest two-pot round of withdrawals is really confirming that the average South African is using their money to settle necessary living expenses and kind of emergency expenses. So inclusive financial planning is definitely in the spotlight, so much so that our recent issue of Pensions World SA, in fact, had a special feature on inclusive financial planning. And we will be putting a handout in the handout bar quickly for all our audience to be able to go and have a look at that and look at some of the interesting articles written by some other industry experts. Today I want to unpack this concept of inclusive financial planning with you, you know, really representing different perspectives in the industry. And so I'm going to start with yourself, Jacques. You got the winning spot as a representative from the sponsor. Jacques, what do you understand by the term financial inclusion?
This is going to be the short version of that answer because I think it could be a very long one. Historically, and I suppose that's the kind of the common held view is inclusion means that a person has access to financial products and services. But that's the underlying assumption. And I think in there is already the first challenge that we have to face today, and that is that financial inclusion is counted as who has a bank account. And we all understand that's just the start of the question. It's actually not the answer. And you've positioned that very nicely. I would argue, and I think the question that actually is on the table today, and that's why we're so excited to be part of this, is the question around, you know, is inclusion around access to product, or is it more about understanding what it takes to manage finances as an individual, as a person, the whole picture. And that's where the conversation about financial planning comes in. Financial literacy plays a role in there. It's a far broader concept. And I mean, the moment you talk about that, I think the other thing to say as well is that if you broaden it to the side of the question that we're talking about, then that inclusion question is actually a far bigger one than anticipated. The assumption that the formerly employed is automatically financially included by definition of understanding. I mean, two-pot proved the point, didn't it? That people understand, you know, that's in question. That would be my 2 cents worth on financial inclusion. That's.
Thank you. Thanks, Jacques. Terence, you come at this conversation from a different viewpoint, and really as an independent advisor, do you have a different view on this concept or phrase that we bandy about called financial inclusion?
For me, it's about making sure we get everybody on the bus. And exactly as was said now, is that starts with banking. It starts with understanding our relationship with money, the flow of our money. Cash flow is just, money is always moving. So how are we controlling that? Do we understand where it comes from? Where is it going? Is it intentional? Is it by accident? And a lot of those basics start with from a budgeting perspective. So before we get into fancy jargon and technicalities and what people should or shouldn't have, we really need to start with understanding how do they generate their income? How do they spend their income? And do they do that with structure? Do they do it with intentionality? And have they got someone to guide and help them? And I've seen many people suffer from that, and that's where I came into the financial planning profession, because it wasn't discussed in my family. Money was always a taboo subject. And because of that, people were left behind or excluded. And it's now to break through that and to be able to offer that kind of support to everybody and make sure that everybody can get that knowledge and expertise.
Thank you for that. Matla, you're the head of member engagement at Alexforbes, and I rely on you to kind of wear the retirement fund hat today. Do you have a different view on what financial inclusion means from a retirement fund perspective?
Hi, Natalie. Morning, and morning to everybody joining us this lovely day. So I don't have a different perspective. Everything that Jacques and Terence have spoken to is very true. And we are seeing that in our environment. Financial inclusion for us means ensuring that everybody has access to information for us, retirement benefit counseling and financial advice. So when we look at, how do we achieve this? We start by understanding why is this not happening? What are those barriers that for us retirement fund members are facing in terms of being able to have easy access to information, counseling, and advice? And we've really been able to leverage our advantages. So whenever we think about solutions, the design of our solutions, we look first to what are we doing well? What are the advantages that we have that we can leverage in order to create greater access to these solutions and services?
Thank you. I'm so glad two of you actually touched on the concept of financial literacy, which I want to get into in a jiffy. But before we move into our next question for Bertie, this is the first time we're going to expect our audience to add to our content this morning. And if my trusty wingman, Chris, can perhaps post our first poll. And while people are voting on that poll, which is around the biggest obstacles they view to be to financial inclusion, Bertie, I'm going to ask you, is it a cop-out to say that due to high unemployment, high debt levels, VAT's about to go up, that we're doing the best with what we have? Is the South African household in trouble?
Yeah, thank you from my side also for the opportunity. I'm not an economist, so I don't know why I always get the economist questions, but yeah, I think overall, if we look at what's happening in South Africa, we had a bit of a positivity on possibly a relief on those measures, but I think we are still in deep waters. I think the whole debate around the recent budget issue, the possible VAT increase, the not giving benefit of inflation on your taxable benefits is impacting over and all with the economy. And if I may, I'm going to try this. I just want to share a slide, if I can, if you don't mind, just showing something. And that's from our recent, we've got a survey with Momentum we're doing in connection with UNISA, and I know it might be slightly outdated with the 2022 figures. If we look at financially distressed, this is, as I said, a survey being done. In 2018, only about 29.7% of individuals were financially stable or financially well, and that decreased to 23% in 2020. It increased again to 28%, and now in 2022, the most recent one that's publicly available is 26% of people are thinking they're in control of their finances. That leaves us with a substantial portion of the market that's actually financially unstable or even exposed, if we can call it that. But if you look at that, and if we could put that next to our interest rate cycle and what's happening, and with a recent not decreasing inflation rates further, but if you look at that number up to 2022, I'm a bit worried that people, if you look at what's happening with interest rates recently over the last 2023, 2024, and hopefully we saw some relief in 2025, which was now stalled with all the issues in the world. But I think if you look at that, I can only see that people getting more financially stressed over time, well, at least for the shorter term of this. And that is a bit of a concern to me. So yeah, I would definitely say people are in deep water, and linking to Terence's comment, you need somebody to guide you through this turbulent waters. It's not going to be an easy journey. I think we all were very positive on outcomes, but I think we're in for a bit of a harder time, and there's where you need somebody close to you to guide you through these. Thank you.
Interestingly, I'm looking at the results of the poll, and these sessions are recorded and posted on EBnet stream. And so I'm not sure those who watch the recording will catch the actual polls in the session. But just over 50% of the audience is saying that the biggest obstacle to financial inclusion is an already stretched household budget, which Bertie, in fact, has just alluded to and shared with us. We then also have the lack of understanding of financial concepts. I'm going to couple that with jargon and technical complicatedness, which was my word, around the industry. I just made up my own word there, and combine that into one. And so that's the second liar in the race. LYER, not liar as in not telling the truth, around why people are not getting involved or being, I'm going to say, intentionally responsible with their financial planning. A lot of that centers around this concept of financial literacy and financial awareness. And I think certainly the webinars that I've attended and the documentation that I've read up until now kind of conflates the two issues of financial inclusion with financial literacy. So I want to take this moment and just invite Nikki from the FPI. She's the HOD of Standards and Certification, to maybe share with us what her view is on the recently published, in fact, it was published overnight, the FSCA's Conduct Standard on Financial Education. And perhaps you could summarize for us, Nikki, what's in there and what the FPI views the role of the financial advisor to be.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity, Natalie, and everybody online. So we are at the FPI very concerned about the level of firstly, financial awareness in South Africa, financial participation. I think that slide that Bertie just shared shows us that probably only that green part is getting proper financial advice at this moment in time. Where's the financial advisors for all the others? And this is part of the conversation we're having today. So when we look at things like financial literacy, we all know that there's an issue with financial literacy because you're not being taught in school to be financially literate. It's not something your parents necessarily know, so they don't instill that information in you when the time is ripe for you to, have that building blocks taught in your growing up in your education. But it's very difficult to catch it later. And that is where the financial planning and financial advisory industry plays a critical role to make sure that there is consumer awareness, consumer education, financial education available to the greater South African public out there. So if you look at what the FSCA brought out, the conduct standard that was brought out last year, there's been some feedback on it in the last few months that we're looking at. And we're also waiting for some more clarity on how this is going to be implemented. But what it boils down to is that they want to standardize to a certain level the financial and consumer education in South Africa to make sure that if you do financial education, it is done in a proper way. Now, one of the things I want to show specifically is I've got the conduct standard open next to me here. And in the definition of the financial education, they speak about education without punting product. I think that's the biggest thing, and that's what they want to stop from happening. In order for us to make consumer education viable and financial education, you may have to make sure that it is information that everybody can use and there's not some kind of sale at the end. And that is what we're advocating for as FPI. Pure consumer education and awareness as part of being a professional and as part of your duty back to the greater South African community out there.
So I'm so glad you mentioned what you should have been learning in school, because you've taken the words right out of my mouth in terms of our next poll, that if Chris could perhaps post for us in polls and we can get everybody active again and see their views. Where do you believe as an audience South Africans are getting their financial information from? And this is going to be interesting to me, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the results of that are. And while people are getting active and clicking and kind of thinking and applying their thoughts to that, Terence, financial literacy is a thing. It's a thing. It's a big thing. I know on EBnet, in one of our pages is dedicated to financial literacy, really trying to explain technical concepts in small, short, simple language. But the reality is that a financial advisor, you know, we're not going to get into their REM structure now. We're going to get into it just now as we discuss the business model. But this introduces what Nikki has said, introduces in my mind a whole pile of more work. Now, as an independent financial advisor, do you view this as extra work, or is this work that you kind of already are doing with your clients?
Natalie, it is core work. It's not extra. This is exactly what should be done, is making sure that the consumer knows and understands in a language they can understand what they are going to transact in, what they're going to engage in, maybe what they're going to acquire. And it needs to be, in one of the principles of TCF, treat your clients fairly, is in plain and simple language. And we need to align that to our audience. So yes, I've got people that are, you know, teachers that want very plain and simple language, and I've got engineers who want the cash flow models and to see everything as complicated as possible. And we need to match that to the advice we give and the solutions we provide. But exactly as you've said, it should be product provider agnostic. It needs to be more around what this is providing and not necessarily who the service provider is that is giving it with that caveat of a sale at the end. And if we can help people make more wise and informed decisions, I think we're going to raise everything and make everything far better for consumers on how they handle their finances and make financial decisions.
Look, I mean, it's definitely that concept of enabling people to be more empowered to make informed decisions is what that conduct standard is wrapped in. And that's the big intention of it. The other thing that the conduct standard talks about is the measurement of the effectiveness of this communication. So it's not only telling people how much insurance they need, for example, but it's also measuring the impact and whether you have informed their behavior. Now, Jacques, to me, for the financial planners on the call, and we know we've got a lot of them today, does this not introduce a whole pile of extra work?
I can only, Natalie, I can only underline what Terence has said. I think the critical thing here, and I think, and I was listening to the explanation of the standard, you know, sharing the information, which is what a lot of financial literacy initiatives to date has been, you know, gets you only that far. It's the ability of the individual that gets that information to interpret it for them in their context. You know, what's their situation, what's their life, what's their behaviors around money. I mean, all of that kind of stuff. Terence made the point, and I think that's the key thing. Inclusion, to my mind, is not about the product first and foremost. It's about understanding where it fits into the bigger picture for the individual, why it's important now and not later, why this one and not that one. So it goes back to that idea of a financial plan reflects an individual's current reality, but also their hopes and dreams for the future, and I suppose the things that they worry about, and making sure that they understand when to address what and how, and only then move into what solution mode is. So to my mind, financial planning, or what a financial planner should be doing, sits in that space. As Terence said, it's central. It's core to what a financial planner should be doing for their client.
Sure, and part of the 6-step process, right? Set out by our accrediting body. And I can't help think while you're speaking that we're speaking to a very I'm going to say privileged audience or few. And to me, financial inclusion is broader than that. And so for me, those who want financial planning will actively seek it. But financial inclusion is also includes getting to the people who don't yet know what they need, or don't yet know that they want to need it or need to want it. And so really this financial education conduct standard talks to that, and really puts responsibilities on everyone's shoulders when it comes to this concept of financial literacy. And Bertie, back to you. I can see in the chat bar someone's asked for a copy of your slide. So I'm not sure if perhaps we can get that through to Chris, and he can load that in the chat or as one of the handouts as the session this morning carries on. But Bertie, from your perspective, I've been a financial advisor. I know how the remuneration models work, and we'll get there, as I've said, a little bit later. But does this kind of responsibility of financial coaching or financial, I nearly use the word care, but that insinuates that financial advisors don't care. But does this not involve a whole lot of work that is outside of the scope of the remuneration of the financial advisor?
Yeah, that I think it is a difficult question. It's one of those, I tend to think that sometimes the remuneration and might be a barrier to access for the average client. I, however, think, and we need to be honest, is that it's also a proper business. Financial advisors is not a charity organization. They need to earn a decent living. The inflation rates is also impacting their expenses ratio. However, on the other side, if I look at, and I don't want to quote another thing, but if we do it in the same survey we did as Momentum with UNISA, it came out that there's also a perception from clients that they know more than that they actually know about financial literacy. I think 45% of people will think, I can help myself. If we do that and we actually test that, it's only about 15% of people in South Africa that are comfortable in helping themselves. So I think there's two ways to the story. There's one is a barrier to people perceive financial advice to be an expensive story, and that's a legacy we came from. It was always a product remunerated story, and people think you need to sell a product in order to give to advice. And I'm so glad, and something that I've been promulgating for a while now, to say it's all about advice as well. But unfortunately, the advice component of that is not as profitable as what the product solution. So people will think, I'll give you advice, but if I don't execute in product, I'm not making money. I can't pay my assistant, I can't pay my petrol, I can't do it. And that's another thing. But I think there's also an opportunity nowadays we need to think out the box. I think technology is helping us in a substantial way to get to audiences which we couldn't get earlier. Distance is becoming less of an issue. So I think definitely, I just want to allude to one other thing. If we look at, people tend to think, and I was a financial advisor myself, and you think you need to deal with the big guys in order to make money. But unfortunately, all guys are not starting big. They're starting small at some point in time, and they're starting young. But I think there's a challenge for us to get younger advisors in the market and transforming market, and even, let's call it the black market, to get to those individuals to grow that market. I've got other stats in that same thing showing what that audience move over time. If you look at 10 years back, what the average audience was for earning a certain income and what they're earning today on the tax table, you need to move with that client, and it's a challenge for us is to get advisors on different models into practices to actually assist, let's call it newbies to market, to actually get that guidance, and people perceive that they not can do their own stuff all by themselves, but they need a coach, a guide, or whatever. And it's like a rugby coach. It's like Rassie Erasmus. He's not the best rugby player, but he knows how to work with people and get them to results. I think that's the important story for me.
Sure, and it talks so brilliantly to the results of the poll, where just over half the audience believes that South Africans are getting their financial information from social media. And this isn't a practiced or rehearsed question. So I think I'll bounce it to Terence, because I'm sure he gets lots of questions around this. Social media, finfluencers, for those of you who haven't heard the term, finfluencers are the humans on social media kind of influencing financial decisions. Look, I follow a couple of them, and some of it is interesting. But in your opinion, do you have people, or in your experience, do you have people arriving at your door kind of going, well, I heard on TikTok I should be doing this?
Absolutely. We get this virtually every day. And look, firstly, I think it's amazing that people have information at hand and they're doing some sort of self-education due diligence. The problem is there's far too many anonymous posts or usernames that make no sense. So where are you getting the replies from, and how do you verify that that information is correct? And there's a great old adage, we don't know what we don't know. So when a client comes in and goes, oh, well, retirement annuities are rubbish because my dad said so. Okay, but on what grounds? Or, we mustn't get financial advice because all you guys want to do is sell policies. And a lot of that is legacy, and a lot of that is true, as just alluded to, because that's kind of the way the industry works. But there is far more value in what financial planning can provide. And I use an analogy with clients, and I use it internally. It's like one massive puzzle, and people often are only focused on the one piece that's in their hand. Us as financial planners can picture the entire puzzle and see, if you take a piece out or force a piece in, what will that ripple effect be? And that comes with certification, like being a certified financial planner, comes with experience. And we have a far larger data sample because we interact with thousands of people every year, where potentially that client has spoken to mom, dad, and a cousin. And because those three people have got an opinion, maybe not based on fact, they take it as true. And that's where I urge consumers rather to find financial planners that have experience, have knowledge in what their problem is so they can help them solve it. And we'll get to the remuneration, and that's where this needs to change, because many advisors want to help, but don't know how to get paid for that. And I can attest that consumers out there will gladly pay if you can help them solve their problems.
So that's a profound statement, and I'm looking forward to unpacking that just now with the panel as well. But before we get there, to just finish one thought around this kind of extra work that's now being introduced by the governance framework within which we all operate. Matla, from a retirement fund point of view, retirement funds issue a lot of what I would call member communication. And that's around their life stage investments or members' life stage investments and retirement benefit counseling. Now, in the perspective of what Terence has just said, where it's a personal engagement, somebody walks in, they've interrogated their financial plan to some degree because they heard some influencer on Instagram talking about it. The retirement fund member is a little bit removed from this conversation. How does the things like the two-pot kind of retailization of retirement funds, which is a word or a phrase that I love to use, but the retailization of retirement funds, how does this impact what, let's just be honest, what we've always seen in the industry as being the siloed roles of I'm an employee benefits consultant and I'm a financial advisor? I mean, you're sitting exactly at the confluence of those two roles. And so I'm interested in your perspective on that.
Thanks, Natalie. That's exactly right. I'm glad you asked that. So I mentioned in my intro that aside from the focus that we give to understanding precisely what it is that members are being challenged with, so we can ensure that the solutions that we design are responsive to what the members' challenges and needs are. We've also looked at how we can leverage our advantages. So you mentioned in our space, we have employee benefit consultants, and on the other hand, we have on the individual consulting side, our teams of financial advisors, but it's not just financial advisors. We also have financial well-being consultants whose role is a lot broader and straddles that of educator and somebody who is able to provide financial advice. So what this means is that we are able to have individuals that can focus a lot of time in helping us bridge the benefit design that the employee benefit consultants are responsible for, with our ability to then help members make the most of those retirement fund benefits. But it goes beyond the retirement fund benefits for us. It's about improving financial capability overall. So we know that your day-to-day financial challenges and needs will impact on the decisions you make regarding your retirement benefits. I mean, we see that in terms of two-part. We've seen it in terms of low preservation stats. So how do we begin to reverse that? And the good news is that we now know, based on our experience of having implemented our enhanced retirement benefit counseling solution for a few years now, is that counseling does make a difference. So there are early signs that those clients that are using our enhanced RBC service are seeing higher rates of preservation. It's also, I think, aside from the fact that, we've been able to effectively use that partnership between the employee benefits and our individual consulting teams, which also include our member education services team that has delivered all of the two-part presentations that we did since around the middle of last year. We've also given a big focus to how can we actually scale the delivery of relevant information from a trusted source, so not from social media. How can we scale delivery of retirement benefit counseling and access to advice? So this is where our digital tools have come in. We've now been using WhatsApp to ensure that we're able to reach more members. And it's been hugely successful. We've got also a WhatsApp self-service channel that we launched, which we call a call center in your pocket. So at any time, whether it's just after you've made dinner and that's your only free moment in the day, you are able to go onto that WhatsApp self-service channel, draw your benefit statements, your tax certificate, check your fund balance. And all of this is to help members not only improve their financial capability through access to information and education, but also to prepare them to receive advice. So if you look at some of our online platforms that we've created to take members through journeys that are specific to what they're currently experiencing. So just-in-time communication, not we throw it all at you and hope you figure it out. But if I am somebody who is about to leave my employer, we ensure that the WhatsApp message the member receives takes them specifically to the leaving your employer journey on our My Money Matters toolkit. And then that takes them through bite-sized pieces of information and a step-by-step guide to what are the things that they need to know, what are the decisions that they need to make, and what is the impact of those decisions. So Natalie, I don't want to go on too long. I know you have a lot of other questions, but for us, really, those partnerships between the employee benefit and individualization side of the business, or what you call retailization, have been key, as have partnerships with employers. So we can't have wellness days. We can't have worksite consultation days like we do without creating relationships and building partnerships with the employers that participate in our retirement fund benefit services. Thanks, Nats.
So we are seeing a business model where these traditionally siloed roles of advisors are being acknowledged and brought closer together. And it brings me to a question to Nikki, which Matla actually touched on. In fact, I think everybody on the call today has touched on it. And even certainly some of the chat has been around, I'm just going to say it, taking a horse to water, but the horse has to decide to drink. And Nikki, the majority of financial planners who would choose to attend a call or a webinar like this today would be CFP professionals. So they fall within your community. And from the FPI's perspective, what are you as the professional body expecting financial advisors to do to encourage action over apathy?
That's actually a loaded question, Natalie, because there's only just over 5,000 certified financial planners in South Africa, which makes up a fairly small number of the advice that is given and the registered financial planners or registered financial advisors in South Africa. So you are speaking, if we speak to our members, they have gone through the competency profiles, they've learned how to do full financial plans, they know what the value of advice is. I mean, Terence is a very good example. He's one of our members that always assists us with consumer education and pro bono. We also expect from our members to give back. It's part of calling yourself a professional, that you have to be able to get back. And just for example, in the US, the CFP board, who is our sister body there, actually has like a CPD requirement. Part of the CPD requirement is a certain amount of pro bono hours per annum that the financial planners have to complete. So it is a thing. But what I wanted to actually touch on with this question that we've been talking about, and I see Anne Cabot-Lethauser has also commented, there needs to be a change, and I'm getting on my soapbox here, in the way that the industry approaches the remuneration and the value of advice. Why isn't there a financial advisor available to the members of every single pension fund out there? And I'm not talking benefit counseling that you get when you decide to retire and have to make a choice, or resign and have to make a choice, or want to withdraw out of your savings portion of your two-pot and make a choice. My son is 22, he just started working. Why don't they catch them there? He's for the first time a part of a retirement fund. Why doesn't he have access to advice that is paid for by the provident fund or the pension fund or whatever retirement fund structure is there? Why don't we change the models to get more salaried advisors, young advisors in to speak to the people where they are, and without them having to purchase a product to pay for the advice or having to pocket to pay for the advice? There's enough money in this industry to change the model, but there seems to be a very big push to do the same thing that we have done for 20 years. It's not going to work for the next 20 years. Off my soapbox. Thank you, Natalie.
I love that. I love your passion around this exact conversation, which invites Jacques to give us his views on this. The reality is, I've looked at the chat bar and around the REM structures and how financial advisors earn money. And let's have that awkward discussion right now around fees. The reality, and certainly when I was a financial advisor, we only got commission. We only got paid on what we sold, which is in fact one of the reasons I stopped practicing as a financial advisor. I'm sure much to Nikki's relief. But yeah, so this commission structure that I only earn money if I sell something. Perhaps you could explain to the people, to the audience today, what that commission structure is quickly, and kind of your views on it.
Natalie, I thought there was some kind of, what's the word, protection for the sponsor against difficult questions. But yeah, let me deal with the question, and I think that's at the core of. I mean, there was a lot of comments around the business model. I mean, I'm not even in the business model conversation. I'm straight just in the commercial model. That's the practical reality. Because fundamentally, and I'm gonna make this as short as possible. Fundamentally, regulation as it stands defines the, what's the right word, the remuneration payable to an advisor as something that's linked to the sale of a product. That's the fundamental underlying premise. But if you roll that out a little bit further, and you start asking the question about, but what about all the services that an advisor renders that isn't directly linked to a product? then the problem actually sits in the definition of services as a financial intermediary. That's also in the Act. And it becomes very difficult if you read through that legislation to extract anything that a financial intermediary does, and I mean literally anything, from something that in some way is related to a product. And if it's related to a product, then the remuneration is governed by legislation. So there's a fundamental, and I mean, the point's been made around the need to rethink the entire industry and rethink how our financial advisors are remunerated. But that starts not with the industry, that starts with the regulator acknowledging the fact that the regulations that we have are driving behaviors that I think has, call it, unintended consequences. Now, I mean, practical reality, Terence made the point. There are any number of financial advisors that do in fact charge fees for the services that they render. And I agree with that. I mean, fundamentally, if you have a legal problem, you go to a lawyer. That's a professional service, and for that service you pay. I mean, financial planner, why is that any different? But unfortunately, our legislation hasn't quite kept track with that. It's moved a little bit. I mean, on the investment side, things like fees and ongoing fees plays into that space, but it's still inherently linked to a product. It's not linked to the professional service that a financial provider or financial planner provides to a client.
That's such a great answer, and you know, and your example of a lawyer resonates with the kind of example that I always use around a doctor. You know, you go to the doctor, you pay your doctor's fee whether you get better or not. Now, that's not suggesting that financial advice should be success related or linked to whether I can retire comfortably or not. But the point is, it's a professional service. And looking at the poll, thank you for all of those who are busy sharing your views in the chat and the poll. But 84% of today's audience believe that the current commission structure that advisors are remunerated on is causing the problem, or at least contributing to the problem. I use the word cause there with poetic license, of course. Bertie, your views, the remuneration structure. You know, you're a businessman from a business corporate, and the reality is, I mean, we know how the team meetings go and what keeps the lights on at Momentum. Your views around this possible contribution of the remuneration structure to the actual problem.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing, and it's actually it's coincidental that our CEO Jeanette Marie at the FPI session about a year ago mentioned the fact to say that often clients say, I don't want to pay commission or advice fees. I don't know why not. You'll pay a lawyer, you pay a doctor, you pay a plumber, but you won't pay the most important person in your life, because that's journey. A doctor, well, if you need a doctor at a point, you will pay whatever that amount is. But unfortunately, with advice, financial advice, it's a long-term journey. And sorry, I'm not trying to do a job that eluding the question, but and I don't know that esteemed businessman you're talking about, but I'll call him in the room. But in saying that, I also want to link to a couple of comments made. We need to start sooner. I had this dream about 10 years back when my kids were still at school to start something at school where you can get an app or something just to guide you through a basic budget, because I was concerned about the knowledge level of the average kid in spending money on their pocket money or whatever they want to get as a story. But we don't vest that thing from young. We actually assume that when you get 30 or you get 40 or you get 50, then it's getting a reality. And I totally support what Jacques said. I think we are strapped into a regulatory environment where things are happening, but I also are positive there's things moving outside of that scope where people are actually adding value. And to what Terence earlier said, people will be paying if they get value. However, they won't pay if they perceive not getting value or getting a better outcome for their personal circumstances. But that's the reality. So I really truly believe that it is a thing that and it is a budgeting across the business. It's not that any business got money to throw in to say, listen, this is a charity thing that we're going to run. We need to make money, and we need to vest models in order to make it profitable. But we also need to protect the industry in the long run. If we don't start investing in stuff like this, we might sit with an audience that's totally disengaged from the market. I mean, I'm just concerned about the average age of a financial advisor out there at the moment. It's aging. It's sitting in the sphere of a rhino. So we need to start investing in younger and thinking out the box. And how do we accompany and get people to grow? The other one, last thing from my side is to say, I'm concerned if you look at people growing with their client base. So you get a person starting at 40, but his client base would stay in that age. And I was privileged to be an advisor, but you struggle if you're at 50 to engage with people of 30. So you tend to lose if you don't invest in something to be involved in the total span of a client and making sure, and we're talking about succession of financial practices, but succession of a client practice is as important to make sure that whatever handover is happening to the kids or the second or the third generation, that somebody take care of that thing. And I think we're lacking in that, and that's something that I think the industry needs to look at too. How do we make it more available, not by freebies, but actually adding value in the advice of clients and taking them through the process?
Such a lovely link into my next point, and we'll start wrapping up now. But I'm reading the book by Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO, and he talks about these 33 business lessons, and hopefully I'll learn one or two of them. But he talks about being able to show value to customers, and that value might be in something that you haven't even thought of, or it might even be an unintended relief or benefit that the person psychologically experiences when they engage with your products. And I'm going to bounce this to Terence, because he mentioned something about behavioral biases in the chat. And so this behavioral finance thing is becoming the next sexy word in our industry, I think. Your views, Terence. I know that you do charge on a fee basis. I don't know if you want to clarify my wording on that, but I know you charge differently, and I know that you approach this whole mathematical sum really from a different perspective. So your views?
So that's exactly what's just been alluded, and the industry needs to change. And I think we need to maybe start using the words profession as opposed to industry, because advisors can only offer what's in their toolbox. And if the toolbox that we are provided by the larger FSPs go, well, you have to charge a percentage-based fee, or you have to charge this, that's how we get remunerated. And that didn't sit well with me a long time ago, and I started researching different models. And we solve very complex problems, and we help people navigate very difficult situations. And more often than not, financial planning is not actually about a product. It's about helping the person get clarity and certainty on where they are going. And we spend a considerable amount of time on education, on CPD, on behavioral finance courses, etc., to add value to our clients and to help them solve those problems and create solutions. And for that, I will proudly charge a fee. The much, exactly as alluded, you pay your doctor, lawyer, accountant, plumber, pay us. But it's published, it's on my website, and I have very few that complain because it's there. And we can understand you're going to pay me R1,000 and I'm going to help you do this. And we will check on this in 3 months' time or 6 months' time. It's when we hide behind things, or we're not truthful, or we go, no, ma'am, you're not going to pay. Don't worry, XYZ insurer will pay me. And that's not exactly true. And we'd rather spend time to educate our client on the ins and outs of all the layers of costs or fees, because there's nothing wrong in having charges and having fees. It's as long as the consumer knows what they're getting, and do they actually get value for that 0.25%, 0.5%, or R1,000. And we spend a considerable amount of time in our financial planning journey going through that with clients, and they absolutely love it. So that's my comment on that, Natalie.
Right, the investment in confidence, even as a human, I am a financial advisor, CFP professional, and I have a financial advisor who interrogates my thinking, because I don't believe in doctors diagnosing themselves. But just the confidence of knowing, even if I'm not on track, just the confidence of knowing that I'm not on track and what I can do to get on track, for me, is priceless. But as I say, I'm the converted. And so the question of displaying or conveying value to the average person, I think is possibly the core of this conversation, maybe. And certainly, I just recently did an interview, which we flighted on EBnet stream, I think this morning or yesterday, around what the financial planning practice of the future looks like. In the context of this great wealth transfer from the baby boomers, men to women, because unfortunately for men, we live longer than you, so we can't wait to spend your money. But that does have practice succession issues for the average financial planning business, which is exactly what Bertie was talking to. And so the way you structure your planning practice, encouraging diversity, these are all parts of the solution. But as we wrap up, I'm going to give you each a moment or two on the stage to kind of share absolute blue sky thinking. If you could change anything or have anything that you wanted in the industry, fast forward 5 or 10 years, what does the advice model look like? So Nikki, I'm going to start with you.
Blue sky thinking. We are developing some kind of internship program where you've got young people coming into the industry, salaried, paid, filling that gap of financial inclusion without having to worry about selling a product. And once again, focusing on the advice and doing financial planning the way that the FBI wants it to be done. So if we can get that in place, I'm pretty sure we will make a big difference. And obviously, we're going to need the entire industry's help to get that done. But that's blue sky. Absolutely.
Not impossible. Matla, from your point of view, blue sky thinking?
So for us, it's about continuing to innovate, learning from what has been done in other industries to move with the times, ensure that we have scalable ways to make information, counseling, and advice accessible to everybody. Looking at innovations that have happened in online shopping spaces that didn't exist 10 years ago. What can we learn from other industries that we can apply to our own to ensure that all of these services and financial inclusion is something we don't really have to talk about in the next 10 years or so. Thanks, Nats.
Welcome, Jacques.
Sorry, just button problems. Button problems. I think that if I may, I agree with what both the ladies have said. There has to be a broader source of access to financial planning. I think that's a given, and there's undoubtedly a need for rethinking the way in which it gets delivered and breaking the link between product and service, if I could call it that. I think that's the one side of it. The other one, and this is I think the bigger challenge, is if we start with the assumption that inclusion is the understanding of the need and therefore the understanding of where to access the answer or the solution to that need. It's been said in the comments, I think it's been said by some of the panelists, if we could start at school, guys, children go through life skills training. I haven't been in school for a very long time, but I know people that are in school. And realistically, you get taught life skills training, but does financial literacy in any manner or form feature in life skills training? No, it doesn't. Isn't that the place to start? Because if you understand that you have a need and you understand, as Terence said, that there's things that you know that you don't know and where to get help with those things, then that's the place by which you bring the people to the service. Then our challenge becomes, how do we create that service in, whether that's technology or people or whatever the case may be, how we create that service to meet the need. I think that's the core for me. Blue sky.
Blue sky. Terence.
is let's put more focus on the sale of advice and planning, and that the product is just the solution. It's a potential solution. It's seeing a doctor and getting the treatment plan is actually the value, not necessarily the tablets that you might get from the pharmacy. And that model needs to change, because I speak to many junior advisors and some who want to join me, and they go, yes, but we went on this academy and we're told if we sell 10 policies a month, we make 100K. And that's nice and easy. That's not the way this should be, and that's not the measurements that we should be using. It's more, did we help and save 10 families from making poor financial decisions this month? And then how do we price for that, and how do we show people the value in that for them to pay it?
Natalie, if I'm
Bertie,
sorry,
if you'd like to honor
sorry, Natalie, I'll quickly interrupt.
Go for it.
I mean, we keep on talking about the doctors, and I mean, those of you that's old enough will know there was a time when doctors dispensed, and then that link was broken. So it's been done before. Let me just leave it there.
Well, on that bombshell, Bertie, would you like to add your thoughts to the blue sky thinking?
Yeah, I'm more concerned about the 5 to 10 years forward, because I might not be here. I'm looking around the room, and it might be Jock, me and you in the outliers here. But that gives us another opportunity. We're not going to be possibly in a corporate, so we might start living our dreams on sorry, jokes aside. But I think what Terrence's saying is so important. If 10 years down the line, I can see this to be a true profession. A profession like what we're doing, and we're aspiring. A lot of us are in the market trying to get this done, but unfortunately, you sit with legacy in some instances. And I might be controversial now, but I think that's for me the blue sky. And how do we actually build that practice to be as inclusive as possible in what we're doing? And I'm talking diversity across, whether it's age groups, whether it's race, whether it's whatever, to get as much as possible people into the net. And last comment is to what Jock said. We need to start early. We need to start influencing education systems and asking people, and we don't want them to be financial planners, but at least understand the basics of finances. I mean, people moving away from maths into maths literacy or whatever. But if I look at people can't even use a calculator in just making a simple sum. So how more with spending your finances, and that's starting a savings culture. That's where I see we need to go. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody who participated today, and unfortunately I have to wrap it up. Although thank you for the kind comments about this important conversation and how interesting today has been. And perhaps we can have a follow up at a future webinar event. But let's wrap up by saying this. I've just had my last child matriculate. For those of you who read my daily newsletter, she's at Stellenbosch, and I had one kid go through government school, one kid go through private school, and in neither of those environments did they deal with anything particularly financial literacy based or awareness based. So I can share that with you. Luckily, they've got a mommy who values this kind of thing and made sure that they spent their pocket money properly when they earned it. And kind of that's how I dealt with it in my home. But if you're waiting for the schools to do it, they're not. And the value of financial and professional financial advice cannot be overstated. And I guess the challenge really is to show that value to the average man in the street, so that we can rather be talking about the success rates in financial inclusion. And if an industry can roll out two-pot the way it just did, I have no doubt that some of these blue sky ideas are completely achievable. So with that, I'm going to wrap up and say thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everybody who attended this morning's webinar. Thank you very much to our sponsors, Glacier by Sanlam. For the attendees that are still on the call, there's still many of you on the call. There is a handout that we've posted under the handouts. Thank you to the audience for participating in some of my crazy polls and sharing your views. And at the end of the day, at EBnet, we really are about providing qualified and quality content to our readers and our viewers, and really with the intention to enable you to fulfill your role with the ultimate aim of improving members' retirement outcomes or individuals' retirement outcomes. We're able to do this by offering webinars like this for free, CPD courses on our website that we don't charge for, and really by the kindness and the generosity of our sponsors and our advertisers. So all we'd like to ask you to do, if you're in the audience today, is to subscribe to our daily newsletter, or to subscribe to our LinkedIn page and our EBnet Stream LinkedIn page. And that will help you keep up to date with conversations like this and enable us to keep asking the difficult questions and having these conversations around what is important in our industry. Having said that, thank you very much. Have a lovely rest of your day. We will be playing a very short exit video or outro, which is what we call it, closing message from Glacier by Sanlam, our sponsor of today. Thank you to them very much. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all at our next webinar, which is on umbrella funds, another one of my favorite topics, which will be on the 9th of April at 1 p.m. So stick on the call to the end. I did promise you to tell you how the CPD thing would work. What we'll do is after the session, we will email those of you who've stayed on the call and share with you how to apply for your CPD certificate once we get it verified from Nikki's team, who I'm sure will process it fastly for us. So thank you very much for attending and have a great day, everybody.
If you're an investor who saw offshore as off limits, there's never been a better time to change your view. With Glacier, it's easy to be part of the bigger picture, to invest beyond our borders and grow your returns by accessing opportunities across a range of markets and currencies. The Glacier Offshore Investment Plan. Less paperwork with affordable investment minimums. It allows you to add to your investment monthly or withdraw at any time. And our skilled investment team offers guided investment choices, making it easy for you to put your money where it can do more. Offshore. The Glacier Offshore Investment Plan. The simplest way to invest.